was us. I'm going to pull up the bulletin.
Is it on a PDF or?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I can sit out on this.
Actually, you don't need, just right click the word processor and bulletins on that. There you go.
Hold on, sorry, let me just. I'm messy right
now. No, I left my phone. Man.
Okay. Alright, and then people coming in. So, do you answer just this part?
You'd start on that side.
Okay.
For now.
Cool, yeah. See if this is even.
Still thinking. Error.
That's always been there.
Oh.
I guess it's on. Okay. Just leave that. Okay, here we go.
It happened?
There you go.
Okay. We're back live.
For the 8th time. Okay, there you go. Now we just wait. Can I check something? Can I see your phone?
See if it's on?
Yeah, because I didn't see your face when I went. Oh yeah, you're good.
I'm good?
Yeah.
I'm wonderful?
You're right there.
Oh,
Let me see.
how cute.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing they see.
Yeah, so we're good.
And the light is nice too.
Alright, I'm gonna go down and bake the cookies.
Bake the cookies. If you hear an anguished scream, you know something happened.
Oh, I'm running up.
Uh-huh.
Help!
Shalom Rahama.
Can you see it okay?
Yeah, as good as I usually see it.
You might want to move it to the other side. This one.
It's alright, she'll be back. She'll be back. Yonatan! Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Well, Barbara's the only other one that's on right now, so we're just getting back. Boy, what a morning. All right, Shabbat Shalom, Kelly. Uh-oh. Are we not plugged in here?
You are plugged in.
Not according to this, I'm losing battery.
Abia.
Feels like it is.
Just looked.
Oh, hold on a second, let me double check. Oh, okay, yeah, it is on. It is charging. I just saw the battery at half and had a panic attack. Shalom Yafa. Shalom Gail. All right, just hanging out and waiting to see who else makes it on. Well, that was a crazy morning trying to keep the system running. I think one thing we've picked up on this is if we lighten the load on what's happening with the Wi-Fi, the amount of Wi-Fi traffic, I think maybe we've just maxed out our router. We had too many things going. The TV was still on. We hadn't shut it off. We had another computer going on the live stream, and plus all of our phones. The phones don't take up much because they're not running any information unless somebody's texting. But apparently that was enough to put the whole system onto sit around and do nothing. And we moved closer. I got the other computer off, and then that seems to have been enough to keep us stable, or I don't know if stable is the best word to use, but closer to stable. How's that? All right, shalom, Bernadette. So you're not, yeah, I guess it doesn't matter week by week to save the Shabbat service. Yeah, I had thought about that, but then I guess we can just keep up the most current ones for a while and then, slowly delete them, throw them into archives or wherever else you put it when you're parking things that you don't want to have out in the open. Shalom, Vince. And still just hanging around and waiting for people to come back on. Actually, you know what? The bulletin is on the website, correct? So there's, if somebody misses this and feel like they've really missed something important, they can always go back and pull it down from the website. Okay. So let's go ahead and crank through this part of it. Let's see. Okay. Announcement, Wednesday online class at 6 o'clock, Galatians 1c. This is going to be the third study in Galatians chapter 1. And as we get more and more into our book. Okay, how do I... No, that's not it. I need to grab the frame. There we are. I think so. Yeah, close enough. Okay, the zoom I don't need, but I do need the... No, that's close enough. It'll work. Okay. Next week's reading. Yeah. Thank you, Yafa. And Ken. Okay, next week's reading is a double portion. And so I put both portions on just because some people like to... Oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot the Mitzvah Torah reading. Just looking at it right now, I left that behind. Okay. So I'm not as smart as I think I am. But you have... you all have the Flame Foundation reading system. That's also on the website. I think it's a link there. So you can catch up on the details if you don't... if I don't make enough mistakes on talking about what we're doing. Okay. So that's next week's reading. I'm not exactly sure why we would take a week off during Chol HaMoed, then follow it up 2 weeks later with a double portion. Seems to me, you want to keep the thing moving, but for whatever reason, the Chol HaMoed, it's not traditional to bring out the Torah scroll, I guess. Anyways, okay, upcoming events is Monday, April 20. Oh, I messed up. For some reason, I was thinking it was still a week later. Okay. Monday the 20th in the evening begins Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Memorial Day. And I did send up to be for handouts a small write-up on Yom HaShoah. So if you haven't, if you haven't done or experienced Yom HaShoah, you can read up on it there. And then also that evening is Rosh Chodesh ER. So it is this coming week. Forgot to do the... for some reason, I was thinking I still had another week to go. Oh well. Then we have 2 big events. So Monday evening. Oh, that's another thing I forgot to put on the bulletin. Today is the 7th day of the Omer. So we keep counting up. So we're counting up the Omer. And so today is the 7th of the Omer. When we get to 50, it's party time. Okay. So we have Rosh Chodesh ER. Again, Monday evening, new moon. If God's moon fits our calendar, it'll be that night. If our calendar is off, then we'll just pick a different day for Rosh Chodesh. Or do what you see, not necessarily what is predicted. Okay, next week we have 2 big days in the Israeli calendar. Yom HaZikaron is Israeli Memorial Day, followed by Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day. and so those are important days for Israel. Um, and they put the Memorial Day right in front of Independence Day, which I think is actually a good idea. Um, it puts the two together, the value of the sacrifice with the great blessing of the reality of a state, the state of Israel. Okay, let me catch up on some of the. Okay. If we get, yeah, my fault. I was planning on getting it out earlier, and then life happened. And it's one of those things when you're sitting at the computer, you don't always remember to do all the things you're supposed to do. Yeah, that's what happened. Okay. Um, yeah, today is the seventh day. That's right, Yafal. Tonight begins the eighth day of counting the Omer. And if you're looking at oh, by the way, that may be your question. If you're looking at the Orthodox calendar, it's got a different way of counting. They assume the first day of Chag Matzot is that Sabbath referenced in the scripture, whereas there's a different tradition that puts the beginning of the counting, the corresponding with Yom HaBikurim, which is the weekly Sabbath after Chag Matzot. That's where the counting begins. So we apply that calendar system, that counting system. Other people and the Orthodox use their own counting system. So there's a difference there. Just be aware of it. Okay. So you have next. We have next week Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom HaZikaron, and then next month on Friday the 8th we have Pesach Sheni. That's the second Passover. In Torah, God says if for whatever reason you can't do Passover properly on the given night, then you have a second chance, and this is your second chance. So if you need that second chance, don't miss it. Okay.
Maybe we can do our Passover at home.
Yeah. Whether or not we're going to be able to do a public Passover on that month, on that day, it may or may not work. We may not get loose. The California governor is a lot less interested in giving us our freedom, and so far it sounds like we're not going to do anything different till the end of the month. Or the end of, that's not kind of think of it.
15th.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. We'll have to see. Maybe we can make, if they let us out at the 1st of May or before the end of May, or before the beginning of May, we can see if we can make a quick push to do our public Passover, our community Passover, sometime around Pesach Sheni. We'll have to play it by ear. Okay. Okay. Chag Matzot is the feast of unleavened bread. Sorry. Didn't mean to talk past you on that. So far, the barbecue for May 30. Yeah. May 31st. Yeah, actually, I see I didn't finish doing that properly. I was going to put a question mark after Simchat Yeshua Messianic Fellowship on May 30th. Question mark as to whether or not we're going to be able to meet then. And then, of course, Sunday in the park, our usual Shavuot thing. Gail, if you don't mind, now that we're talking about it and I'm thinking about it, see if we can reserve a kiosk for the park for that day. See if they're going to be open and taking reservations for then. Yeah, part of the problem is we get used to doing. We're used to the terminology, so someone who doesn't know it gets left behind. Let me know please let me know if I say something you don't understand. I'll explain. Okay. Okay. So, if circumstances permit, we're going to try to meet at Shul on May the 30th, and perhaps the next day, on the 31st, on Sunday, at the park. So I've labeled that if circumstances permit. That's what we're aiming for. If not, we'll have to figure out something different. Okay. Then, so you have Pesach Sheni, May 8th. May 12th is Lag BaOmer. This is the 33rd of the Omer. And it's a traditional observance. And Yom Yerushalayim, of course, is another Israeli holiday, Jerusalem Day, celebrating the return of Jerusalem. Okay. Yeah, we may have to just sit back and be ready to go. Sounds kind of familiar. Prepare your meal with your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, your cloak girded around your waist, and if we get a last minute notice that we can, either meet at the shul or meet at the park, we'll just have to try to jump on it real fast. Okay, that's it for the dates on the calendar, for now anyways. So, any other questions, comments, rebukes before we start our Parsha discussion? Yeah, it's possible we'll know. Actually, I still think it's Red Sea. Some people like to. Oh no, come to think of it, you're right. It could be a Reed Sea. The difficulty is sometimes people use that identification to say it was a very shallow piece of water, and Israel just simply walked basically through the swamp, which makes it even more interesting since all the Egyptians drowned in that little bit of water. Go figure. Okay. Yeah. Oh, Jonathan, it'd be good to see you there. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started in our Parsha discussion. Oh wait, this is not the one I had in mind. Okay. I'm hoping it didn't get closed. Yeah, because I need to get something up and visible. Abigail. All right. I need to bring up the text as we're reading. Looks like the only thing we have up on the internet is I want the readings.
Oh, for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me. Oh, there it is.
Mm-hmm. Is that what you wanted for
Let's start in the
Hebrews?
Torah portion, yeah. Here we are.
Oh, it's 10. Oopsies. There we go. 11.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Parshat Shmini. Oops, that's 11. My mistake. It's supposed to be 9. There we are, Parshat Shmini. Okay, Shmini means 8th. So, of course, you get the name for the portion in, usually in the first phrase of the section. So, Shmini means 8th, so it's on the 8th day. So, from where we left off last week, just zoom forward a week, and here we are. Okay. So they just gives you the time and place. So it's after a week of living in the tabernacle zone. Aaron and his sons are finally going to get started doing the serious part of their work, where they're going to be formally consecrated, or formally put to work, I should say. And so there's still some more sacrifice, basically sort of a repeat at the beginning of the sacrifices. Okay. And so it was, so the formal part of sanctifying the tabernacle for the whole of the congregation, for the whole of Israel to use, or to bring their sacrifices, all that's now done, now getting started. Okay. So you have you have what's there. If you have any questions, comments, or rebukes, please type them in, and I will try to, if need be, back up and get to it. Because I want to make sure that even though we're in a very restricted amount of conversation here, I still want you guys, if you have something to offer, or got a question, or a comment, or even a rebuke, let's have it. Okay? So everything gets ready, gets moving. This is in chapter 11. I should say chapter 9. Oops, went the wrong way. Okay, here's 10. And this is where things go crazy. And of course, bad things always happen right away. And so this is it. You have Nadav and Avihu, okay, sons of Aaron. They put took their incense burner, put fire in it, put incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, and something he had not ordered them to do. And so the fire of the Lord came out of the presence of fire came out from the presence of the Lord and burned the two of them, that they died in the presence of the Lord. Okay. Okay, so we learn from reading. We really, sometimes the scripture doesn't give us a whole lot of commentary in detail. It just simply says this happened, and uh, and right there at the beginning, at the immediate, you're thinking, why? Were these, what was going on? What did these guys do? That was, that was wrong, and you're kind of left having to figure it out. Okay. Um, we need to figure this out. So, first of all, you need a fairly decent idea if you weren't zoning out too much when you had the commandments concerning how you handled the incense. Okay? We have a hint in the text that Nadav and Avihu took their censers, put fire in it, and offered unauthorized fire. So, the question you have to piece it backwards is, what is unauthorized fire? And for that, you have to have what is authorized fire. So what are the commandments? What is God's instruction concerning how you do the incense? Okay, and it turns out that you're supposed to take coals from the altar and put those in your censer, then put your incense on it, and that would be acceptable. So when it says that they offered unauthorized fire, suggests, strong hint, that they just grabbed any old fire from any old place in their excitement and jumped into the holy place to swing around their incense censers. Then God says, nope, that's not right. You got to do this right. And sometimes things like this happen. And we have a great example also in Acts chapter 5, where rather than having a stern warning to straighten up and fly right, rather than being told this is wrong to do things this way, you guys need to repent, rather people died as a result of doing something incorrect. And so this happened with Nadav and Avihu. This happened with the husband and wife over in Acts chapter 5, basically lying before the congregation about the sale of their property. So this happened. Of course, this is a big shock to everybody. Everyone, I'm sure everyone there is thinking, okay, let's make sure we get this done right. Yeah, Bernadette. Yeah, they should have known. Difficulty. We have the benefit of reading the text. We have the benefit of reading the text for years and having this discussion ahead of time. So it's easy for us to say, oh, yeah, they should have just heard the instructions. If you're getting a lot of instructions all at once or over a course of time, you may get a little bit of fog in the instructions. However, I don't think, this is my 2 cents, my opinion. Had they done this as a simple error in judgment, or just simply forgetting the detail of having to use the coals from the altar, you would think a better way of doing it is just give an instruction and, chalk up the first oops to just not remembering the details correctly. So you're kind of left with another assumption, and I'm going to explain it as that. There's kind of an assumption that they knew that wasn't the right way to do it, but they did it anyways. And we have another comment that follows a little later on, that where the commandment comes that when the priests are doing their duty, they shouldn't be drinking alcoholic beverages. So it's possible that Nadav and Avihu were drunk and, just sitting around the tent, as it were, for a week, eating the food of the sacrifices. And I guess they decided that they needed something to help them get through the time. And that's also, again, this is one of the things. One of the things the rabbis teach is to look for juxtaposition. Why is this next to that? And so, why is the statement unauthorized fire next to Nadav and Avihu putting their incense in their censer and waving it before the Lord? Why is the comment about not drinking anything alcoholic is right next in the same section, discussing why these guys got burned? So something to consider, and it's a very useful, very helpful piece of wisdom when it comes to reading and interpreting Scripture, because too many times people like to pick and choose a bit here and a bit there to string together some sort of a doctrine or a point of view. And if there's something in the context of what's being discussed that is different than what that doctrine is trying to present, you need to point that out. That the context seems to indicate, because of juxtaposition. And when we get into, we read it in the morning prayers, but when we get into Numbers 15, there's a lot of what you can reason out when you look at the juxtaposition of various different statements and commandments that all culminate with the commandment to wear the tzitzit. So anyways, let's continue on through. Let's see. Okay. Okay, Nicole, only God knows the true kavanah. Kavanah, there's attitude or intent, in case you're not familiar. Yeah, but we're kind of left seeing that they weren't necessarily 100% true. And however, that's not necessarily it can be an argument, because they may or may not have known they did something wrong. They may or may not have been wise to have been drinking. So you kind of piece together what you can find and take your best shot at it. Sometimes when things are just sort of referenced as a side note, you're kind of left going, okay, why didn't God just say this plainly? But we're given enough information to work it out for the most part. Okay. Moshe tells Aaron and his remaining sons, don't do the normal course of mourning for Nadav and Avihu. Being that you are specially holy, you're not allowed. And this is actually in Torah, that even for one's own wife, one is not allowed to defile themselves if they are in the tabernacle doing God's service. Now that seems like a really harsh thing, but again, holiness has a special calling and special requirements. If ever you want to get beat up, so that's probably not the best way of explaining it. Tell God you really want to work at a new level of holiness, at a greater level of holiness. Suddenly, stuff that you thought was okay, not a problem, is going to be a problem, because God's going to take you at your word and push you towards a new level of holiness, which means stripping away stuff that God has simply not worked you over about yet. And so the end result, of course, it's good to be holy, and it's good to improve your walk. It's just that we're not always emotionally or mentally ready for the work that's involved with doing that. Okay. Okay, so verse 8, 9, we have the what I mentioned already. Don't drink any wine or other intoxicating liquor, neither you nor your sons with you when you enter the tent of meeting, so that you will not die. Okay, so this gives you a different reason why not enough of you died. They were drunk. Or at least one assumes so because of the close proximity of this commandment with the event. Okay. Okay, and again, why? Because you got a job to do. Okay, verse 10, that you may distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean, so that you will teach the people of Israel all the laws of Adonai. Okay. Okay, so Moshe tries to push things into more, some sense of normalcy. Verse 12 and following. Take the grain offering, do what you're normally going to do with it. Eat what you need to eat. Get back to normal. You're not allowed to do the normal kind of grieving, so get to what your new normal is going to be starting today, anyways, or what you started a week ago. Okay. Then Moshe goes one step further in verse 16. In verse 16, found out that the goat of the sin offering was completely burned up, rather than having the ceremonial portions taken, or the burning finished outside the camp. So he gets angry at the kids and says, "Why didn't you eat the sin offering, when you're supposed to?" And so Aaron, verse 19, comes back and says, "Hey, we've had enough stuff today. This was pretty big distraction, and things are a little bit off, and considering that Aaron especially was still wanting to be in mourning for his kids, would God have had would have been accepted, would it be pleasing to the Lord?" And Moses finally said, "Oh, okay, let's move on." Okay. Any questions, comments, rebukes as far as this section is concerned? Okay, I'm reading a lot of the comments. Very good. I'm glad you're discussing this, and we're kind of all working on the same idea that having zeal but doing what you think is right, even if it's wrong, is not a good answer. And that's what we really need to, but we need to understand. Okay. Let's see. Let's move over to our Haftarah. Unless anybody has any other suggestions. Let's move to the Haftarah. Oops. Okay. We missed one. All right. Okay. Hold on a second. It's getting dark in this corner. Harder to read. Let's see. We are in
2 Samuel.
Thank you.
Right there.
That's okay. 2 Samuel what? Oh. I have it here, but I have to pop it up to where it's a little bigger. Oops, wrong thing.
Is that better?
Hold on, I'm almost almost have an idea of what I'm doing here. Okay, 2 Samuel 6, 1. All right, where am I now?
Get the reading.
Trying to get back on our page here. Okay, 2 Samuel 6. R.
Maybe now.
I'll get it. For some reason, my okay, we need to get this back up and this. Okay, there we are. Okay, 2 Samuel 6. Sorry about that. Okay. So we have, we're familiar with the story. Okay. The Ark of the Lord was not in Jerusalem. David had moved into Jerusalem to be his capital city, so he wanted to bring the Ark and set up the tabernacle there near where his palace was. Okay. And again, this is another incident of good intentions but lousy execution for not paying attention to detail. Okay, so instead of carrying it by rather than the priests and the Levites packing up the ark and carrying it, they put it on a cart. Right. Well, they're a new cart, so they're trying to do something nice anyways. But so the sons of Abinadab, Uzzah, and Achio were driving the new cart. Of course, we know the story. One of the oxen stumbled, the ark started to shift, and Uzziah in the King's version of the name, stuck out his hand and grabbed the ark. Okay, because it was shifting on the cart. And of course, God says, nope, don't do that. That's bad, that's wrong. And it throws the whole thing into the whole celebration of bringing up the ark to King David in the tabernacle. Throws the whole thing out. Okay. So they came to Nachon's threshing floor. So we know what happened. And the Peretz, the breaking out upon Uzzah. I think the translation here, the breaking out of Uzzah. I think it's a little more direct on Uzzah. Okay, so everybody freaked out, and the ark got set aside into the house of Oved Edom, the Gitti. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing, is Gitti. This could be a place name, or this could be a people name. And if it's the case, here you have an example of possibly a Gentile housing the Ark of God for 3 months and being blessed for doing so. So anyways, news gets to him that the house of Oved Edom's been blessed, and so King David figures this out, that God's not mad at us. We did something wrong. So they took the time to do the proper research. So they brought the priests and the Levites to wrap up and carry the ark, and David just goes on a huge celebration of bringing the ark home, as it were, to its new home, at the tabernacle in the citadel, the city of David area. And so, we have this huge amount of sacrifices. When the Levites and priests went only six paces, there's more animal sacrifices. Unless this was a really, really short distance, and I really don't know for sure. This was a super short distance. That's a lot of animals to go. Of course, what King David did, he basically had a virus-style picnic. He gave people food and sent them home, and it was quite a party. Okay. Who was of the Kohanim? Are you asking? Yeah. I think I forgot to make a point that I wanted to make in the previous reading. Yeah, I completely jumped a whole section. One minor piece. Leviticus 11. Okay. Well, let me finish this and we'll get back to it. Okay. So David was leaping and spinning before Adonai, and so Michal, the daughter of King David, whom daughter King Shaul, whom David married, was filled with contempt. Not that they were necessarily always in a good relationship, but this certainly kind of wrecks it. Okay, they had a big party, lots of food, everyone went home happy. Really great turnout, great result, nobody died. And so Michal gets into her snark, and he says, "Such honor the king of Israel earned for himself today, exposing himself before his servants' slave girls like some vulgar exhibitionist." Now, this is the accusation. Now, we know he was wearing an ephod, which is probably a short skirt, by modern definition. But nonetheless, it was also proper to wear trousers under that ephod. So if you take her for exactly what she says, there's the hint that David's exposing himself as he's dancing. That doesn't mean, and this, if you learn anything from politics these days, just because someone makes an accusation doesn't mean it's true. And just because she says he's exposing himself in a vulgar manner doesn't mean it's true. But rather, she found an excuse to be angry with him and made this her excuse to try to put him down. And so King David responds in an equally snarky manner. Sometimes what they teach you in negotiations is that you respond in kind. So if somebody's being snarky with you, you respond in kind to keep things on an even playing field. And you can see certain politics and certain politicians, they fight back and others don't. And you can see the difference in the results, what happens with people who don't fight back compared to those who do. Okay, so David responds with, the Adonai who chose me over your father. Okay, so you don't have much spot to argue here. And over everyone in his family, to make me chief over Adonai's people, over Israel. Okay, so basically what David's saying is, because of the position that God has put me in, I will celebrate with all my strength, and if that's contemptible, I'll go even further. So that's his. Talk about kavanah. Attitude. This is David's attitude. But here's the thing: nowhere does any text say that David misbehaved in doing this, but rather it was only Michal's accusation. So understand, just because there's the accusation doesn't mean it's true. Okay. Um, okay. So let me back up. I know I did I was so focused on moving on, I completely forgot Leviticus 11. Okay, Leviticus 11 is the new set of food laws. And I say new set because of all the things that have changed over the years, the food laws up to this point changed a couple times. Okay, we have, for example, in the beginning, okay, it appears we were vegetarians, maybe even just fruit eaters. Okay, and some people press for that kind of a diet because that's the way it was then. After why did I skip chapter 11? How do you put it? It's my brain. Okay. I don't know. For whatever reason, my mind was on getting straight to 2 Samuel, and that's me. So I'm going to go back to it, pick it up. Okay. So things changed. You have, after Adam and Eve were removed from the garden, okay, there appears to be at least a change in how things were done. There was now not just farming, but also husbandry, animal husbandry. Now, there's no plain statement, and there's not even a chance to really hint, not much of a chance to really hint whether or not they ate the animals they were ranching. We do have, though, the knowledge that it was acceptable to present a burnt sacrifice of an animal to God. So whether or not that you can take that and extrapolate that people were eating meat for food back then doesn't say. Okay, and since we're in a different paradigm, it doesn't matter so much. That's one of those things you can discuss over dinner at the Passover, but it's not something that's really going to change anything at this moment. After the flood, we have a very interesting phrase that most people don't pick up on, and that's the commandment that all kinds of creeping things are now food. Now, if you look at the actual word that's used there, it's a 4-footed creature with no other definition. So does that mean that everything from lizards to possums are food? Apparently so. At least without any further definition, the Bible doesn't give it. That's quite possible. Okay, I'll leave it as a possibility. You have, but now we get to Leviticus 11, and we have another plain statement of what is food and what is not food. Okay, I had. Did I attach the discussion on kosher? No, I didn't. I'll need to send that up and have it added to the downloads. But so here's the basic shtick. Okay, as far as mammals are concerned, whatever has a split hoof and chews the cud, that's food. Okay, and that's a pretty hard, fast rule. You have other descriptions of animals who might chew the cud but don't have a split hoof. You have animals that have a split hoof, don't chew the cud, or chew the cud but don't have a split hoof. Those aren't food. Okay, now here's the important definitional thing, and this is where defining things helps you win your argument. Okay, when you're talking to somebody about kosher, it's best that we never mention anything other than what God said as edible as food. Never use the word food when you're talking about pig. Never use the word food when you're talking about crab. Okay? Never use the word food for that. People ingest it. It may not kill them immediately, but by God's definition, it's still not food. Okay? And we have to be careful in how we run that argument, because you will win or lose the argument in the definition, what you define and how you accept for a different definition. And the definition is not anything you want to ingest is food. That's not the definition. The definition of food is what God said we should be eating. Okay? And this is very helpful, because when you get into the arguments like in Mark 7, we have the statement that, Yeshua rendering all foods clean. Okay, people who don't understand the context will say, well, you see, I can have my pork, I can have my ham and bacon and all that kind of stuff. Okay, you can have your ham right where you am, right, Gail? So you want to make sure that you carefully define the argument in Mark 7 wasn't what was on the table was kosher or not, but whether or not the netilat yadayim, the washing of the hands, rendered your kosher food unclean if you didn't do it the right way, or if you didn't do it at all, which is the accusation against Yeshua and his followers. Okay, so that was the argument. The argument was netilat yadayim. The argument was not whether or not food was kosher. The food that was presented was kosher. This was a Pharisee house. Of course it was kosher. Okay, so the argument was very narrow as to the Pharisee tradition. And Yeshua is saying this particular tradition was not needed because the Pharisees broke their own tradition by being unclean in their hearts. And so making the show of washing their hands didn't change the sin in their hearts, the uncleanness in their hearts. And therefore, this tradition doesn't have value and doesn't have the weight of Scripture, which it would be, because the tradition is, if you don't do this netilat yadayim correctly, then you still have unclean hands and you ruin your kosher food when you touch it. Okay, thus rendering unclean what God has called clean. Okay, so back to Leviticus 11. Okay, so the basic thing for mammals, choose a cud, split hoof. Okay, nothing else besides that. Okay, fish, not so well explained. It's actually plainly stated, but there are issues and questions. Fins and scales. Okay, so your basic clean fish would be things like your trouts and your excuse me, salmon, even tuna. Now salmons and tuna can have adult versions that don't have scales, but the adolescent age does have scales, and so those are rendered as okay. That's explained to be okay. But things that aren't, fins and scales, swimming fish in the sea or the freshwater, anything else besides fins and scales is not food. Okay, so that's reasonably simple to figure out. I still have an argument with regard to whether or not shellfish would qualify, because they have fins and they have scales on their body, but no one wants to take up that argument. So actually, it's usually the answer is an immediate stern negative, and it's not worth it for me. I've gotten over that habit, and it really doesn't bother me any longer. But it's one of those arguments you can have for the sake of an argument. Okay, birds. Birds is a lot harder, because you have to figure out what's in the not list and how what is for food is not in the not list. Okay, and if you look at the not list, you have a pretty straightforward, fairly easy to understand. I'm sorry, Bernadette, you said, what about fish? It just put me to mind. Things that have fins but don't have scales are still not considered food, like catfish. Okay, catfish has a skin, and even though they have fins. Okay. Yeah, eel. Thank you. It has fins but no scales. Okay. Um, so those are so those are on the not list. Okay. Birds. Essentially, when you read the list, and there's one name that's off this list that we have to talk about because it's a translation issue. Um, um, yeah, um, is that the basic type of bird that's no is essentially a carnivorous carrion eater, carnivorous or carrion eater. Okay, primarily carnivorous. Let's put it that way. Um, there are shades of difference here, and we'll talk about it. Now that's basically it. So everything that's not primarily carnivorous or carrion eater primarily is okay. All right. Now let me get back to the translation issue so I get that out of my mind. There's one usually in the middle of all this list of types of birds. In the King's English, it uses the name ostrich. You're thinking, this is strange, okay? Because realistically, as far as what ostriches eat and what they do, they're basically a giant chicken, okay? But chickens are edible. Chickens are food. Chickens, turkeys, all that kind of thing. And so you end up with a basic definition is that those animals that are primarily carnivorous and or carrion eaters are not food, but those that maybe it's okay if they eat some, the somewhat carnivorous, somewhat carrion eating, but are more primarily herbivores are okay. Because you think about it, chickens, we had some chickens for a while. We raised some chickens, and they eat everything. In fact, you can put a chicken carcass out there. When you go to the supermarket and you get the pre-cooked chicken, and you have some leftover carcass there, you can throw that in with the chickens. They'll pick it clean. They're not only they're carnivorous, they're a little bit cannibalistic, and so understand those are still considered clean for food. So it's more of a primary nature versus an absolute statement that carnivorous or carrion-eating birds are not acceptable for food. To a little bit, yes, but not as a primary. Okay. So that leads us to bugs. Okay. Now, in some cultures, people eat bugs. Okay. That's fine. I grew up an American, and it's just not in my diet. And other people eat bugs. Grasshoppers, locusts, the kosher bugs. I haven't gotten up the gumption yet to try that. So, and this is more of a personal taste than it is what's food and what's not food. So I'm not going to say it's not food. Bernard, but don't ostrich eat shrimp and get their color from shrimp? That would be a flamingo, I think. Yeah. Well, no, they get that from algae. The color from the algae, I think. Yeah, ostrich is usually a plains animal. I don't know if they're around much shrimp. Okay. Yeah, Gail, interesting point. Look at the COVID-19 outbreak at Smithfield Pork. So it was a pork processing plant. Okay, I was kind of had that in the back of my mind. Where over 600 people got sick. There's a great argument for being kosher. Okay, a lot of the problems that people had were from a lot of problems people have are from not being kosher, not being clean. So you get up, one, you get bad nutrition, two, you get bugs and junk and other stuff in you, diseases. Shalom, Alex. If you were trying to get on early, sorry about that. We had much trouble keeping a connection going this morning. Everything seems to be really nice and stable, so I think our fix needs to be that one, maybe I just need to park a little closer to the Wi-Fi, and two, we just have to be careful how much stuff we're running off the Wi-Fi all at once, so we don't overload it. Okay, so bugs. Okay, flying animals that creep on all fours. Interesting little piece of science discussion there. Bugs have 6 legs, but the Bible talks about walking on 4s. Okay, it's kind of as if the Bible does not categorize the jumping legs as walking legs. So if you deal without the jumping legs, mostly the bugs, especially what's kosher for food, have jumping legs. So the Bible seems to not count the jumping legs as part of the 4 walking legs. So if you have a science question about that, now the Bible never plainly says that. You just kind of left to figure that out. So anyways, there are just a few varieties. Okay, and apparently not the flying critters, but the jumping critters are okay. And so since we don't make a big habit of eating grasshoppers and locusts in the American diet, I don't want to put a lot of time discussing that. If you want to try it, have fun. It's not something I'm going to look into very quickly or easily. Okay. And then basically now here's another part of the argument. You need to make sure that you win when someone is trying to argue that God doesn't care about what we eat. Okay? Because the end of this description explains why. Now tell me, where in Leviticus 11 does God say, eat this and you'll be healthier, don't eat that and you won't be healthier? Yet that's the common argument, isn't it? And then people say, oh, we didn't have, the science there to cure a ham. It always cracks me up. Think what you got to do to get a piece of pork so it at least doesn't kill you when you eat it. You have to cure it, which means the thing is naturally diseased. And you want to eat that. Okay. The biggest reason, now God tells us why he wants us to have a peculiar diet. He says he's holy, therefore we should be holy. So when we have these arguments with people, okay, those are the things we need to bring up. One, God defined what's food. And number two, the purpose is for our holiness. We abstain from what some people call food because God has called us to be holy. And the method for being holy, as God defines it in Leviticus 11, is what we eat. That's the big argument. That's the big argument. Okay? And I can't stress that enough. Okay? You're going to win this argument in the definition of what's food, and you're going to win the argument over the reason why we have these commandments in the first place, that we will be holy. Now, probably easily, more people will find out your walk with God by what you eat and what you don't eat, especially if you don't run with the crowd to eat all the stuff that's not food. You will make a more noticeable appearance of belonging to God than pretty much anything else, as surprising as that may sound. Okay? So, when, you're at work and, someone brings in pepperoni pizzas for everybody to eat and you don't eat it, um, you know, and you do something different for lunch, um, you're stating that God is real and God needs to be taken seriously. Okay. And people are going to say, oh, you don't like pizza? Oh, you don't like pepperoni? No, it's just not food. Well, you can pick off the pepperoni. Yeah, right. That's about as useful as. Okay, it's not a polite description. Those of you who know me make that argument before. It's not a polite description, but it's very functional. Um, what if there's something, what if everyone was happy to eat something that was just purely disgusting? Okay. Or, if something purely disgusting was on that, would you eat that? No. Okay. Well, from God's point of view, what does he call pork? An abomination. Okay. An abomination is King's English for saying it's makes you sick enough that you want to throw up. Okay. That's what God thinks of pork. So why are we making excuses for eating something that God calls an abomination? Okay. So the point is, we are called to be holy, and what we eat, or more importantly, what we don't eat, makes us holy in everybody else's eyes around us because we don't eat the everything. Okay. Now, a case in point, one of the ways we could be better protected, one of the early explanations of how this virus got started is it's said to have come from a wet market where there was disease intercorrelation between one animal species and another because of the conditions of the wet market. Okay, if you don't eat that stuff and you're careful to not be in contact with any of that stuff, okay, it lessens the chance of any kind of cross-contamination from that stuff. Now, thank you, Bernadette. You may have to blend the locust in a smoothie, like a banana fruit. Yeah. Chop it down to where you can't recognize what it is. So, anyways, that's the reason, and that's really my biggest thing I want to leave with you guys is the reason we do it, because this is how we identify how we belong to God, and it's our testimony. It's the best testimony of all. Okay, how we live. Okay, let's move on to. Oops. My spelling is wonky because my eyesight's wonky and I have a hard time reading. Computer screen. There we are. Hebrews 7. Okay. About Melchizedek, king of Shalem. Okay. Okay, Linda, thank you very much. Locusts are keto. Yeah, you're probably right. Probably not a lot of carbohydrates in that thing. Again, though, I think I might pass on that. But that's just my own, Americanness speaking. Okay. So, first off, Hebrews 7 introduces the character of Melchizedek, and we talk a little bit about who this character is. Okay. The names mean things. So, king of righteousness, and also king of Shalem. Okay. For instance, the word Jerusalem means the city of peace in Hebrew, or the Shalem more specifically wholeness or completeness, more than strictly peace, but that's okay, because you can't have true peace without wholeness and completeness. So here's this character, and by the time we get to this letter to Hebrews, there's a little more shtick, a little more explanation, and probably from popular discussions about Melchizedek, because or just an elaboration on what people are talking about when they're looking at this character Melchizedek. It says verse 3, there is no record of his father, mother, ancestry, birth, or death. Rather, like the Son of God, he continues as a Cohen for all time. Okay, not one of the Levitical priests, not any of the sons of Aaron, but rather something special, something different. And I want to bring to mind the text that says there's no record of his father or mother or no ancestry. Okay, this comes into play a little bit later on. I'll talk about it more complete because we had a big to-do a few years back because someone was trying to teach a particular point of view that wasn't really that kosher. Okay. And so verse 4, just think of how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the choicest spoils. Okay, so and Melchizedek brought out some wine and some bread, and made a blessing on Abraham, and Abraham gave him a tenth. So obviously, there's a recognition of something here that's going on, far more than just paying for lunch. Okay. And so, in fine detail, this explanation goes, there's a commandment in the Torah that a tenth of the income of the people go to the descendants of Levi and even the Cohen. Now you have, the first fruits go to the Cohen. That's technically not the tenth, but the tithe, the tenth, is given to the Levites who aren't the Cohen, who aren't of the priestly family. And it's kind of interesting here that, and let's make this a little side statement here. When it comes to people teaching about tithe, okay, notice what is considered the tenth of the income of the people. Agribusiness, okay? Agribusiness, okay? All right. Okay, from their own relatives, they received this tenth, okay? Even though they're descended from Abraham, by the time you get to now, you have a tribe separated for the sole and singular purpose of serving God at the tabernacle, okay? So, and again, verse 6, and I want to camp on this idea because I need to stress this time through. But Melchizedek, even though he was not descended from Levi, took a tenth from Abraham. Okay? Okay. When we get into more details about all of what God said is to be tithable, he never mentions earned income. Laborers, workers, businessmen, shop owners, manufacturers, those are never mentioned. It's only done in connection to agriculture. Okay, and that's why I make that statement. Okay, so okay, okay. Even though he wasn't a descendant of Levi, okay, he took a tenth from Abraham. Also, he blessed Abraham, the man who received God's promises, and it is beyond all dispute, just in case he's writing to somebody who wanted to raise their finger and say, but, it is beyond all dispute that the one who blesses has higher status than the one who receives the blessing. Okay? You may give a gift to a superior, and the superior may receive it as a blessing to them, but as far as pronouncing a blessing, at least for the sake of this discussion, it's impossible for someone of a lesser status to bless someone of a higher status. At least that's what it said here. Okay. Okay. Moreover, in the case of the Kohanim, the tenth is received by men who die. Okay, everybody who farms dies. Well, okay, all the rest of us do too. Well, in the case of Melchizedek, it is received by someone who is testified to be still alive. Okay, and just because we don't have a statement in the Bible that this Melchizedek character was born at a particular time with a certain set of parents, and he died at a certain time. By the time you get to this point in time, around the time of the destruction of the temple, the character of Melchizedek has grown into this, okay, where nobody knows where he came from, nobody knows where he went to, had no relatives that we know of, and we also have that one peculiar statement in Psalms where it says, "Behold, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek," which almost can be read as a suggestion that maybe Melchizedek never did die. You know, he's still alive, at least as far as being in the presence of God. He has not died, or else the priesthood itself could not be eternal. Okay, that's an argument. It's an argument someone can take on that point. Okay, so it's testified, and again, I'm not entirely sure how much of this is scriptural or cultural, what he's talking about. But he's formulating this idea that he's getting to, we'll get to this eventually. This is sort of a long way around. Some people argue that Paul is the one who wrote this letter. And if you're going to make that argument, this would be one of those places where you can point out this reads like Paul, because he goes on long side trips and sometimes gets back to the point he started to make before he took the side trip. And this is one of those. Okay, it's a long side trip about this character Melchizedek. Okay, one might even go further and say that Levi, who himself received tenths, paid a tenth through Abraham, inasmuch he was still in his ancestor Abraham's body when Melchizedek met him. Okay, science aside, that it's certainly colloquial within Israel's understanding that the seed that a man has in his body, is basically the same lineage that all descendants have from him. Okay. Therefore, if it had been possible to reach the goal through the system of Kohanim derived from Levi, since in connection with it the people were given the Torah, that need would there have been for another? What need would there have been for another? Okay, different kind of Cohen, the one spoken of as to be compared with Melchizedek and not be compared with Aharon. Okay, so all what we read before is basically a lead up to this discussion. Why did we need somebody different than somebody from the tribe of Levi, of the family of Aaron? Okay, well, it was necessary because the priest, even on Yom Kippur, and remember Hebrews was very highly focused on the events of Yom Kippur, even in Yom Kippur, even with the sprinkling of blood in the holy place, sins were forgiven, but it wasn't the forever ending of all sin. You know, what happened to people on their way home from the Yom Kippur service? Okay, they started sinning again because there wasn't a permanent, complete change. Okay, so this is what we're getting to when you get into verse 12. For if the system of Kohanim is transformed, notice it is transformed, this leads me to kind of guess that the letter to Hebrews was written probably just about when or just after the complete destruction of the temple, because obviously if there's no temple standing, there's no sacrifices going, so things have to change. Okay, so the system of the Kohanim is transformed. There must of necessity occur a transformation of Torah. Okay, this is our argument. Other than some changes in the food laws, this is the only place where the Bible talks about things. No, I'm sorry. The more I think about it, the more I think there's more places. Just the whole idea of the firstborn used to be the priest, now it was the Levites. That's a change in the Torah. Okay, it doesn't happen frequently, and it happens by God doing it, not for us making the choice. Okay? All right. Okay, as far as Abraham being the 10th generation of Shem, I don't know. I'd have to look at that. Okay, So here, the transformation of the Torah. Verse 13, the one about whom these things are said belongs to another tribe, from which no one has ever served at the altar. For everyone knows that our Lord arose out of Yehuda, and that Moshe said nothing about this tribe when he spoke about Kohanim. Now, let me get to what I was hinting at earlier. It's been a year or three ago. There was a big brouhaha in the congregation because someone decided that it was important to push the idea that Yeshua was both Kohen and Yehuda. Okay, the Lion of the tribe of Judah and high priest. And therefore, because only as both together could he do what he did. And yet, if that's the case, then what we're discovering here in Hebrews 7, repeated in at least 3 different times, is that Yeshua could not have been of Levi, could not have been of the family of Aaron. Okay, and so in fact, when this person was bringing out this question, I was right about the time we had read this, so I remember, well, what about Hebrews 7? Where it says that he could not have served as a priest because he wasn't of the right tribe. That caused a blow up, which actually, even these years later, I've never heard that person give a reply to that. They've maintained this idea, but they've never adequately challenged my statement about, how is it that Hebrews says that Yeshua could not have been a priest in the natural human sense because he was not of the family of Levi, in the tribe of Levi, the family of Aaron. So, anyways, just be aware, there's an argument out there, and there's some people teaching this. And so it's there it is. It's right there in the text. Okay. Verse 15. It becomes even clearer if a different kind of Cohen, one like Melchizedek, arises, one who became a Cohen not by virtue of a rule in the Torah concerning physical descent, but by virtue of the power of an indestructible life. Excuse me. Indestructible life. For it is stated, you are a Cohen forever, to be compared with Melchizedek. Okay, so the life, and so the idea here is the person for whom this is being eventually going to get pointed to, and you don't have to read too far ahead. Yes, it's Yeshua. Is an eternal life. Yeshua had eternal life before he came to this world in the shell of a human being, as a human being. And so it wasn't by physical descent, that is being a Cohen, but by an indestructible life that he was in the form of Melchizedek, just like the legends of Melchizedek state that he was, no one knows where he was born, where he died, and who his parents are, who his family are. Therefore, he's this eternal special character. The writer of the Hebrews is using this formulation about Melchizedek to point to Yeshua. Okay. Thus, on the other hand, the earlier rule is set aside because of its weakness in efficacy. Thank you. In efficacy, for the Torah does not bring anything to the goal. And on the other hand, a hope if something better is introduced, though through which we are drawing near to God. Okay. Very interesting statement, and some people camp on this for the wrong reason. Okay. And what was the weakness and the inefficacy for which the Torah could not bring anything to the goal? Here's the thing, and I mentioned it earlier. You can do sacrifices for your unintentional sins and even some intentional ones. You can attend for the Yom Kippur service, and you can, call on God to make that sacrifice count to you. But what happens on the way home? You sin again. So the weakness of Torah, its inefficacy, the lack of being able to bring us to the goal of permanent holiness is not the weakness in the Torah, but the weakness of us to follow the Torah. Okay? Torah cannot fix us. It can point us to the right direction, and it does point us to the right direction. But it cannot fix us in that it is a matter of our will to follow Torah. And the better we follow Torah, the more holy we are. But are we perfect with this? No way. Okay? And so there are people who take this paragraph here and torment it to mean something that it's not saying. Okay? And it just basically comes from the ideology that, like Gail says, Jesus died on the cross to rescue us from the commands of the Father. No, that's not the case. In fact, everything Yeshua taught was to keep the Torah. He never told us to not do it. Okay? So what is the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Okay? Hey, that's the base. Love God and keep his commandments. That's the whole of it, right? That's the whole basics. The rest of it's details. Okay, so the Torah did not bring anything to the goal. It did have its inefficacy in that it did not make us permanently holy. It cannot make us holy because that's our doing. And it was weak in the sense that it relied on us to follow it. Okay, but not because the Torah itself had flaw, but rather this is how God set it up so that we have the choice to sin, and we're quite adept at doing that. But we also have the option for turning away from sin and turning towards God and doing things that he said to do. And that's the part that we need to be looking at. And then we have this once for all sacrifice. Okay. Now, let me double check one thing. Okay, verse 19 was our end there. Okay. Yeah, you can say he's a Cohen according to the Torah of Mashiach. But understand, Mashiach never did tell us to disregard the Torah of Hashem, if you want to make a difference between the two. Okay? But rather they were one and the same. Okay? What Mashiach did is for our redemption, not for changing the commandments. Okay? Even though here we have an argument that there's a necessary change, that it's now Yeshua as the Cohen of the Cohen of Melchizedek. His death and resurrection supersede. Okay, his death and resurrection supersede. But we can always talk about after all this is said and done, will there ever be a return to animal sacrifices? And I would contend there's a possibility of that, because not every sacrifice is a sin sacrifice. There are memorial sacrifices. There are thanksgiving offerings. And when we have a time of a temple or a tabernacle here, it's possible Messiah will ask for those to resume. Okay. If he says no, okay. If he says yes, I'm not going to be surprised. Okay. I don't know if it's the New Testament testing us as much as there's such an effort to tear us from Torah that we have to cling desperately to Torah, to follow it even in these times. That's more like God testing us than the New Testament testing us, my point of view anyways. Okay, that's it. At least that's it for me. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? Thank you guys. You're having a good, lively discussion going on here. And I appreciate that because it tells me that you're thinking, you're studying, you've been around this block a few times, and that's always good because it gives you a lot more to work with. Okay. Let me let this go for another minute or two. So if you have any other final questions, comments, or rebukes, you can get them in. I had heard that we had cut off too soon last Wednesday for the Galatians study, and we cut off before everyone had their comments in, or it didn't stick. So I'm going to just sit here and basically be quiet and try not to get too much involved with this until we get to the point where we can finally shut it down. So, all right, God bless you, kids. Thank you for coming. And let me do my YouTube responsibility. Be sure to like, share, and tell others. Hit the notify button, notification button, or the little bell thingy. And Wednesday at 6 o'clock, we're going to do the third session of Galatians chapter 1 online. So we'll be there at 6 o'clock. And I think we've solved our problem with the system cutting down on us. We just need to be careful not to overload our Wi-Fi, which I'm a little surprised that it broke down that easily. Anyways, so shalom. I'm going to back off here and just I'll just sort of get quiet now. Enjoy. God bless you. Have a good week. Shabbat shalom. Yeah. Don't close it. Yeah, that, yeah. Not yet. Yeah. As Gail had mentioned that we cut off before, on Wednesday, we had cut off before I was done talking. So I'm going to try to be quiet and not say much of value. Okay, so why is today different from any other day? Say much.
Are you still on?
Yeah.
Yeah, still. I'm going to let it go for about a minute before we actually knock it down. So that way, just in case, that delay, for some reason, shutting it off here cuts off the delay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good.
So we had
22
people on. That's good. Good number.
Oh, it's almost like film.
Yeah.
All right, there where we are now.
All right. Go ahead and close it then.